Welcome to the League of Women Voters Zooming with the Alderman series of interviews. My name is Priscilla Mims, and it's my pleasure as a League member to be able to do the interview tonight. The League itself was founded right here in Chicago 101 years ago, and you should know that we are a nonpartisan political organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. And the Chicago League is one of hundreds of local leagues throughout the country. These interviews with the aldermen are part of our efforts to educate people about those who represent us in setting the policies and ordinances that govern us here in Chicago. And today we're very pleased to welcome Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez of the 25th Ward. Welcome, Alderman.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh, we're very pleased to have you. We very much appreciate you taking the time. Everyone should know that this Zoom session is being recorded and will be available for viewing after today on the League website. And we'll be sending you, Alderman, and everyone who registered for this program who is not a member, a link to the video when it becomes available. Also, everyone should know that we have provided the Alderman a copy of the questions that I'll be asking. And before starting on those questions, we want to show you a map of the wards of the city of Chicago. So here hopefully you are seeing them. So as you can see, this is the north part of the city, and we come down to the very end. And the 25th Ward is located pretty much right in the middle. And here it is, right here. And for those of you who were with us before, we interviewed Alderman Thompson, who represents the 11th Ward that sneaks in right in between you, your ward, Alderman. And now let's take a look at the actual shape of the ward. And in order to get it all on one screen, I had to minimize it quite a bit, but you can see this is the Eisenhower Expressway here, the Dan Ryan here. There's a little bit of the Stevenson here, and again over here. So with that, let's get started. So would you describe your ward as far as what are the principal boundaries and what neighborhoods does it include?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. And again, just want to thank the League of Women Voters for the invitation. Pleasure to be with you today. So the borders, geographic borders, more or less, you know, the farther east is on Clark Street, farther west and western. Then I go the furthest on, and I have a map here in the back. I don't know if you can see it, but it's 34th Street, more or less, the farther south to Washington Street on the north side. The wonderful communities that I have the pleasure to represent include Chinatown, Pilsen, the Abla Homes, Barbara Jean Wright, the University Village, UIC, and Little Italy area, West Loop, South Loop, and McKinley Park. So those are some of the neighborhoods that I have the pleasure of representing, and I think that we have the honor to be one of the most diverse areas in the city of Chicago, and it's really an honor and pleasure to represent the 25th Ward.
Great. And as far as what's located within the ward, is it mainly residential? Do you have some significant commercial or even some industrial areas?
Yeah, so we do have both, right? So we both have, we are, like I said, a very diverse community, like even in that, right? Residential, commercial, and we do have an industrial corridor as well. We do have several commercial corridors, 18th Street, Cermak, those are very busy, important commercial corridors. We also have, of course, as you know, in Chinatown, we have Wentworth Avenue, we have Archer and the Chinatown Square. We have Madison, the Madison corridor. on the West Loop, Little Italy on Taylor Street. Those are some of the main commercial corridors that I have the great pleasure to represent. We also have the Pilsen Industrial Corridor that it covers more or less the Blue Island, Cermak, between Western and Western and Pike Canal, I would say, where the industrial corridor that we have in our Pilsen and mainly Pilsen area that I have the pleasure to represent, and of course the rest are a wonderful mix of residential, and we have residential for single family homes to condominiums in the West Loop, and of course the Habla Homes community, which is a CHA development. We have hot development as well. So I think that we are indeed hopefully a blueprint where the city can be, if we can find a way to make sure that we have development without displacement, if we can preserve the social fabric of these wonderful communities. And I think Chicago, as you show in the map, is a great city because of the neighborhoods. 70, well, now we're going to be 78, but 77 neighborhoods that have their own vibrancy, identity, and there's so much to see in there. So everybody watching, hope that you have the opportunity to come and see the wonderful 25th Ward.
Yes, you really do have an amazingly diverse ward of all different ranges of types of housing, as well as a great variety of commercial strips too, and a lot of ethnic areas combined in your ward. When did you first join the city council?
So I was elected in 2019. This is my first term in office. I'm a freshman alderman. I was elected in May 2019. That was when I was elected.
Very good. So what made you decide to run for alderman in 2019?
Well, one of what we see, what we saw, especially and we've seen for a long time, the level of disinvestment in our communities, the level of corruption that went along with that, the lack of democratic processes to make sure that we truly represent the best interests of the residents. Before I was alderman, I was an adult educator and a lead researcher at the University of Illinois in Chicago, where I have the opportunity to work for over 10 years directly in our classrooms with parents, Head Start parents, teenagers at risk, people from the southwest side of the city. And I was really disheartened to see what's in our classrooms, the level of disinvestment, the violence that affects many of our communities. So I live in Pilsen. This being my neighborhood, the point of entry for many of us, like it is Pilsen. And when we see this investment, we also see the decisions that were affecting us. So I was at the time, this is at least, I don't know, almost 10 years ago, when I was doing a lot of work in the community. And I was also on my on the side, I was a volunteer soccer coach, and I was also volunteering in a program so kids can learn how to write and play soccer at the same time, to encourage and really get our young people to get engaged, really engaged in the educational educational process. So I believe a lot of in Paulo Freire is a great inspiration for me to talk about how we really engage with our communities in the education process, to truly meaningfully engage in our communities, not only to learn in the distance, but to truly learn and be part of a community. And Pilsen, Chinatown, many of our neighborhoods are a perfect example of that. So unfortunately, in our community, and as you know, there was a lot of corruption that was really pushing a lot of families out of the neighborhood. Over 14,000 residents have left the community, not because in anything normal or any normal process in this, but truly it is because of the lack of integrity in a lot of our decisions, the lack of inclusion, the lack of democratic processes. And I think that that really took a big toll in our community. So when I was, before I decided to run for office, some of the schools that I was working directly, one of them in particular, where I was a volunteer soccer coach, was about to close. There was an announcement back in 2000, this was 2012, I believe, when the previous administration under Mayor Rahm Emanuel decided to close 50 schools, where at the beginning were 130 schools. And two of our schools were in the closing list. One was Pilsen Academy, where I had the pleasure to be a soccer coach. And the other one was Youngman Elementary, where I was also a member of the local school council. So just to really see the lack of programming that we're going to lose, the overcrowded classrooms that come because of those decisions, and the impact in our community, I think it was a call for action. So I decided to, and I was already engaged, but not necessarily engaged in the electoral process. So I think for me was very eye-opening, the role of the alderman in these decisions, the need for us to make sure that we have public participation, that people understand the implication of it closing their schools. So I became involved with the parents in the organizing to save the schools. And because of that organizing, those two schools are open today and they're doing well. They're doing very well. So it really inspired me to show, I learned about organizing. It took me a little bit outside the classroom, but it really, I became later a board member of the Pilsen Alliance, where I did my organizing for affordable housing, for educational opportunities for kids. So anyway, so that's what really motivated me to run. The first time around in 2015, I was short 70 votes for the runoff, but we knew that we need to keep organizing. So in 2019, the community was able to speak, and really have the ability for self-determination, the ability to have true democratic participation. Now we have a local zoning advisory board where residents have direct input in zoning matters and developing matters, so that we can make sure that we vet the process and vet the projects that come to our community. We are very highly engaged in our education, in our educational process. We participate in bringing more resources to our communities. Now we are the only community has the dual language school in the South Side. We're the first school in Wither Elementary. We're also serving the local school council. So just to see what is possible versus what it was given to us. It was really a motivation for us to get involved civically. Civic engagement is critical. And I think that, now that we are being 2 years in office now, confirms the importance of not only organizing on the ground, but also organizing electorally to make sure that we have good representation.
Well, good for you for not getting discouraged and running again. I think so many people try once and then that's it. But obviously you've been doing a lot of work locally before you were then elected in 2019. And that certainly makes a difference when the community knows you and you know the community. And particularly in your case, since it's so diverse and you've got all those expressways cutting things off. So that makes it more challenging, I'm sure. Now, as a freshman, generally freshmen don't serve as a committee chair or vice chair, but you do serve on committees. So what committees do you serve on?
I served on several committees. I served on the zoning committee, housing committee, the equity and contracting committee, the transportation committee, the traffic and pedestrian issues committee. I think that those are some of the main committee, and the health and human relations committee.
And of the committees you serve on, would you pick one and just kind of explain the matters that come before it that you participate in doing, at least the initial review before it goes to the city council?
Yes, absolutely. So maybe the zoning will be a very key. I mean, it's important, I think, for people to understand the zoning process and kind of how development works in the city of Chicago. So in the zoning process, and I think that a lot of that has been subject to controversy because of the prerogative, right? So I do think that we like to take the opportunity to clarify that. I do think that what many of us campaign and we want to make sure that we have is community prerogative, meaning that we want to make sure that when there are zoning decisions, where there are zoning decisions on projects, development projects or housing projects that come into our community, that we have the opportunity to discuss with our constituents and to make sure that we discuss the merits of the proposals, that this should not be about campaign contributions. This should truly be about what is in the best interest of our neighborhoods, what is in the best interest of our communities, what is good interest of the people who live nearby these projects. So certainly I think that is a key committee. I think that the zoning committee decides zoning matters on all 50 wards across the city, from the small development, from the single family homes to the 3 flats to the big developments of 200 plus units or commercial, residential, mixed use. All of that goes into the zoning committee. So it is important for us to participate in this process, to be engaged, and for the city to be, in my opinion, better engaging residents in this process, to make sure that we don't notify residents after the fact, but before this happens, during the development process, during the feedback process, so that we have robust participation, and ultimately that we only move forward with projects that are truly in the best interest of our neighborhoods. And I think that throughout the process, we have a zoning advisory board. I just would like to describe how we get to that committee before we put our items in the zoning committee. We have a local zoning advisory board made of residents from across the 25th ward. We have representatives from Pilsen, Chinatown, Abla, from West Loop, and across the 25th ward, we have 12 members that represent the 25th ward that take the preliminary review on these projects, ensuring, one, that I fulfill my commitment not to take money from developers; two, to ensure that this the process for community feedback, it is followed. We record all the conversations that we have, every conversation from the very beginning, from what the beginning of the conversation starts. It starts with the zoning advisory board residents that can see what the proposal is. They can take some initial feedback, and that we go into a public meeting once we have at least some basic guidelines of what the community is looking and what is not. For instance, we have recommended here in the 25th ward, because of the level of displacement, that we recommend that we have a higher set aside of affordable housing units for big projects. So we have a quality of life plan that we have always had in Pilsen the highest a quality of life number of affordable housing units under the quality of life plan, 30% set aside for big projects that come in the community, so that we can make sure that we can set aside affordable housing units for people from our community that also would like to stay in the community that they love and care about. We also discuss, of course, the needs and greeds of the project, right? How it will affect the community at large, and then, of course, we will host public meetings so that we can gather additional feedback from residents in nearby areas, so public notices go out. So once we have the majority of residents okaying these proposals or applications, we take the items to the zoning committee for final zoning approval and council a council stamp. So that's how our 25th ward has decided to conduct our zoning decisions. Again, we were inheriting a number of irregularities. So that's why we decided to make sure that it was important to have a very robust process that really advocates for transparency and the best interest of the constituents.
So, so what you've, just for clarification, particularly for our audience, what you've mainly described is certainly what's going on in your ward under your direction. Obviously, other wards have potentially different ways of handling it before an alderman would end up supporting it and bringing something to the zoning committee for approval. But sounds like you have a lot of transparency, and the league is always for transparency. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Now that you've had a couple years on the council, are there one or two things that rise to the top as far as what things you would like to change in the operation of the city council? Yeah,
well, certainly I think that one of the challenges, and I think one of the priorities that we have, has to deal with ethics reform. I think that is very critical for us to, and in this, in the line of transparency, I think one of the biggest threats to democracy is big money into our democratic process. When we put private interest in front of the or before the public interest, we see the unfortunate situations that we continue to deal. We have at least right now in office 3 alderpersons who are indicted that are still in office. My predecessor was another example of unfortunately corruption in the city of Chicago. And for us to really look at any decision from housing to education to the environment, all these decisions require that the representatives of each community operate under the highest level of integrity. I do think that the evidence that we see and the unfortunate cases of corruption that continue to linger in our city are the biggest impediment for us to truly fight for reform at every level, from public safety, as I said, environmental justice, affordable housing, education, you name it. Whatever the issue is, requires to have a high level of integrity, the best interest of the community at heart at all times. But I'm really concerned about the influence of big money corporations and billionaires that put specific agendas before the interest of the public. So I've been working with my colleague, Alderman Matt Martin, on important ethics reform to reduce the level of influence that special interest groups have in the city of Chicago, so that we can make sure that each representative, each of the alderpersons in the city of Chicago operates always looking for the best interest of their constituents and not for any particular group. So I do think that the violence and the many issues that we see in the city of Chicago, the unfortunate situation that we continue to see our city in, can be changed, and it has to be changed by leading with example, leading by example, showing every public servant or commitment to public service. I think is imperative, and I think that ethics reform is, I think, one of the pending issues that need to be addressed.
Okay. Now, you mentioned gun violence, and that leads us into the next question, which is if there are a few actions that the city is currently taking that you think will be effective or already are being effective to reduce gun violence in the city?
No, certainly. I think the issue of gun violence is the number one issue that we have right now. I mean, the number of mothers and parents that have come regularly to our office because they have lost a loved one to gun violence. It is disheartening. It's truly one of the biggest tragedies that we have when we have children, young people, and in general, constituents who have died of gun violence. Last year, we have over 750 murders in the city of Chicago. This year, we unfortunately may be on track to be in the same, following the same patterns. So some of the, and I think it's important that we're honest about this issue, because by not looking at the research, by not looking at what the evidence shows, we're not going to be able to address this problem. I think there's been a lot of conversation around the same tactics, the same strategies that we continue to use, and the results are for the public to judge. I think that what we have seen, and by unpacking many of the cases that we see in the city, I tell you here, in our own community, we've seen some tragedies that come from the lack of mental health services. Mental health is a matter of public health. I'm sure maybe some people in the audience who are watching this have seen the tragedies, time after time. Just to name a few examples, the terrible tragedy of a teller in a bank who was stabbed to death inside a bank, inside her workplace. It reminds me of something that happened. This was in River North, but there was another incident where an employee in a Walgreens, this was like several months ago, maybe last year, was also stabbed to death, a mother too, in a random attack inside a Walgreens, inside their place of work. When you unpack a lot of these cases, what you start seeing is that there's a lot of mental health problems. People with schizophrenia, people with mental health issues that need services, they need access to mental health. So one of the issues that we see, and again, there's a lot of talk about the issues of guns, the gun violence and violence in our streets. But there's a lot. This is a much more complex issue. It's not only there's not only gangs. There's a lot more to that. And the way that we even address the issue of gangs as a way to almost dehumanize, these tragedies that we have in our community, right? We got kids as young as 13 years old that get arrested. They're in juvenile, and then with a record. And then when they get older, we have not done our job to make sure that these kids really have a second chance, that we really are able to offer help to a lot of the kids who are very vulnerable. So the investment in mental health is critical to address a lot of the violence that is discussed on TV and sensationalized is, and according to studies, in terms of gang violence, 3 out of 10 shootings in the city of Chicago being involved what is called the gang violence problem, right? But that's 3 out of 10. What happened with the other 70%? And we don't talk about the 70% when we talk about the issues of mental health, right? We had an issue in our ward, with, again, in a tragedy of a PhD Maryland student who was stabbed, was just jogging in a random attack again. A lot of these issues point out to mental health. There was a terrible shooting spree, and I would like to give examples because I do think that we need to be honest about this. There was a terrible shooting of someone who was shooting, all the way from the south side to Evanston. Again, another case of mental health. So everything shows that we need to make sure that we invest in mental health, that we invest in prevention of violence. Once this happens, we're just reacting to the problem, and we continue to invest in reactive strategies that have not worked. So I'm investing in mental health, investing in employment opportunities in after-school programming, in violence prevention. We are right now in the 25th ward, are working on a marvelous program. I would love to get, make more people engaged. But recently, our alternative high school, Rita Lozano, received an $80,000 grant from the county, where they're going to help our young people to talk, to learn about digital media, right? How they can use their phone, how to use photography. Some of them are already talking about, maybe I'd like to take some acting classes, right? So we're now putting together a group of, filmmakers, a group of people who do violence interruption, a group of people who do marketing, a lot of people, the principal of the school, to put together a team so that we can engage our young people, that we can show them the options that they have, that we need to show our kids with our actions and policies that we care about them, that we love our young people. And that's my teacher voice talking, because when I look in the classroom, I see all the kids, all the adults, all the parents that we talk to, they all, have something beautiful to contribute, something beautiful that they want to share. And I think that we need to create those spaces. I tell you, from the classroom, when I was in the classroom, a lot of the success came from that kind of engagement. But that requires us to really impact these severe problems that we have, that we really start looking at this complex issue that we have, and that we talk about mental health, we talk about violence prevention, we talk about investment in our schools. When we look at what's happening in our city, we cannot forget, and that goes back to the reason why I run for office in the first place. When we close 50 schools, those are the schools where we have services for our families, where we have social workers, where we had safety nets for a lot of our parents. When those safety nets are gone, when half the mental health clinics, public mental health clinics were closed, when we see the level of disinvestment in our communities, when very little opportunity for our young kids to attend a trade, to go to college, to go to community college, to be an actress, to be an actor, those are opportunities that are within reach. But when we deny those spaces, when we close them down, when we invest in surveillance, when we invest in repression, when we invest, and I think that we got to talk about safety. When we talk about public safety, we got to talk about a broad number of things. And I think my concern is that we continue to see these as this was like, this was just a matter of pushing sometimes problems aside, but we're not really going to the root causes of violence, right? So I think getting at the root causes of violence, at least here in our community, has shown us that when we invest in prevention, I'm talking about, mental health, right? Preventive measures are the most effective measures. Preventing young kids to drop out of school, preventing young kids to lose faith, and I think like a number of young kids, I like to go regularly to high schools and talk to young people, I listen to them. A lot of times, what we hear is like, like depression, anxiety. They have many in our community, over 5,000 people have died in this pandemic. We have a lot of trauma. And if you add to that, potentially, if this continue this unfortunate trend, we're going to reach perhaps 1,500 people during the same period of time, victims of gun violence, direct, homicides. So again, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage people to look deeper into this issue, because oftentimes this becomes just a matter of policing, and we're not talking about the root causes that are truly going to make sure that we have justice and peace in our communities.
Sure. No, and the big issues, and it sounds like you're making some attempts within your own ward that hopefully can be expanded elsewhere, and also obviously take things that are working elsewhere and add them to what's going on in your ward as well. It's something I think everyone agrees we need to get a better handle on. Kind of switching topics completely is that we know the city council is going to very shortly, they're going to be embarking on redistricting. So the aldermen have decided, rather than set up a separate commission to do it, that you all are going to do it under the rules committee. Now, as part of this series of interviews, we've been looking at looking at the ward maps, and we've seen that a number of the many neighborhoods within the city are divided among 2, 3, 4, and even 5 different wards. We're wondering if you think for this new map, should there be an attempt made by the aldermen to try to keep neighborhoods together as much as possible and within the legal requirements?
Absolutely, and I think, of course, in this issue of the census, I think it's critical, of course, to follow the census numbers and, of course, the legal guidelines. But with that in mind, I do believe that it's important that, and we know that communities, when they're not separated, as you said, in 2 or 3, 5 different areas, they have more, they have more agency, right? The communities have better representation, right? When there's a unified front per se, right? So, and we have conducted several public meetings here in the 25th ward. We have a 25th ward redistricting coalition that has been working already on having public meetings. I attend them just as a listener, to hear, what are the sentiments, and that has come out in areas like the West Loop, for instance, where there's we have and I've heard about areas like Englewood and so far, or Chinatown. So I think that it's critical that we listen to our constituents. I think, for instance, one of the and I think that there's multiple perspectives, that we certainly, one of them has been to make sure that the communities remain as close together as possible as neighborhoods, right? You have 77 neighborhoods, 50 alderpersons, right? So, and I think that's also why you have that number, the number of alderpersons trying to represent, each of those neighborhoods, right? So we believe that we have like anchor communities, like in our case, Pilsen is kind of our anchor community, right? Where, most of our precincts are. So making sure that communities don't get split, is that's one of the challenges. And again, that's what we have heard from our constituents. And we certainly believe that, and following always these public meetings to make sure that there's not only the census and the legal matters, but also the voice of the community is heard when make these decisions to truly have the best possible representation in each neighborhood.
We wanted to ask you about your opinion about ranked choice voting. And just for the audience's sake, this is an alternative election system where voters rank candidates in order of preference. And there would not be a runoff in this case, but rather you rank them when you're voting the first and only time. And if a candidate receives more than half of the first choices, that candidate wins, just as what happens now in Chicago with the February election. However, if there's no majority winner after counting all the first choices of people, the race is then decided by what they call an instant runoff. So the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. And then those voters' second choice are counted and distributed among the candidates. And this continues until someone has at least 50% plus one of the votes. So we're wondering, what do you think of that, or what do you think of the current system of the February election with the top two vote getters going into a runoff?
Well, no, certainly there's a lot of improvement and a lot of room for improvement in our electoral process. And just a little bit of history, right? I think that our process of the runoff election really comes from an attempt to stop the first Black mayor in the city of Chicago, Harold Washington, right? And that's what the whole process came about, and every attempt to make it as difficult as possible, right? To have someone who made history in our community. So I think it's important to understand that. So with that in mind, I do think it is critical for us to have these kind of proposals. I know that other cities, I know that there were some challenges in the recent New York election I've been following closely, right? But I do think that certainly some considerations that need to be put on the table. Certainly, I think ranked choice voting is one of those that I think that we got to see how we can make sure it works in our community. But I certainly think that it probably will be an improvement to what we have, right? Especially when we see the lever, and I think that we have to match that, right? Because what I see in other municipalities, right, is ranked choice voting, but also that they have campaign contributions limitations, right? So I think that will be an important effort to do it side by side. I think that is something that we, following New York and some of the elections, with all the complications, and I think there's no system that is perfect, but I do think that we certainly will see an improvement, in my opinion. And I think that if we can add, campaign contributions reform for campaign contributions, I do think that we will be in a much better place, because ultimately what we want is a system when we truly elect the representative who has the majority of votes, right? And I do think that is I think the premise under ranked choice voting, and I think that is definitely a valid choice. I would love to add to that if we can use ranked choice voting and campaign finance reform side by side. I do think that we'll see an improvement to what we have seen in our city.
Okay. Well, one of the things the league does do advocacy work, and one of the things we're always trying to do is saying what is the best way to be effective in our advocacy. So if we were interested in supporting one of your initiatives, what steps would you advise us to take?
So that's a great question. So I think that it'd be great to, we have a legislative team, right, where we have several priorities in our ward. I think some of the main issues that we see, of course, is affordable housing. You have over 120,000 units that are needed in the city of Chicago. There's a shortage of 120,000 units of affordable housing across the city. We see it, and you see it across our viaducts and parks and so forth. Homelessness has gotten worse and worse, and we see that this is a national problem. But here in Chicago, we continue to see almost 80,000 people in stable housing. Families who have stable housing. Is difficult for children to learn under those conditions. We also see with great concern the issue of global warming, right, and the environmental impacts that it has in each community. We see the natural disasters, getting worse and worse every year. So in our own backyard, I think environmental justice is still a pending matter. Ethics reform, as we discussed, getting big money out of politics so that we can make sure that we address these issues, because the influence of big money, the influence of corporations and developers has gotten us to the point that is really needed. And I will really want to commend you for your advocacy, because if there was a time to have this level of advocacy, I cannot think of a better time. There's so many challenges, and I think the first step, is this, connecting with us. We have a legislative team. We also have our independent, well, it was called independent precinct organizations before, right? It's not an independent political organization. So we love to connect you with, because those are made of residents, right, from the across the 25th ward, so that we can discuss about. I'm just sharing my priorities, right? But I like to be in the for the sake of transparency and also democracy, discuss that with the larger residents and see maybe we can organize a town hall, maybe organize a discussion where we can make a proposal of some of the priorities, but maybe together we can decide, okay, this is an issue that we should all get behind, and we should all, inspire the other 49 wards to get behind, so that we can start seeing, I truly believe that Chicago is not only a wonderful city, but can be a blueprint, right? If there's so many issues right now, but if we overcome these issues, I'm confident that we can be a model. I think Chicago has some of the hardest working people in the country, has beautiful, it has a beautiful city, beautiful people. But some of these challenges, I think, are only going to be overcome with this kind of advocacy when we bring residents, people who love and believe in our city together, so that we can overcome these individual agendas. I believe in the power of democracy and collective power.
Thank you. Well, one last question for you, Alderman, and that is you've got 2 more years remaining in your term. So what things would you like to get done, or at least started? And I'm sure there's a long list, but if you could maybe limit yourself to 1 or 2 things that are near the top of your priority list.
So 2 things. Let me do 3 priorities, because I think I can be very quick. But I think that the ethics reform is key. I think with Alderman Martin, we have a good bill that can really help us reduce the influence of big money in politics. So ethics reform is something that we really need to get done. I think despite what happens, after 2 years, I do think that is something that would be of great benefit for the city. The other one is environmental justice. I do think that we have not paid enough attention to the issue of the environment. And I think that is something that we need to prioritize. I'd like to see if we can restore the Department of the Environment. I think that was a promise that was made, especially under the current administration. And I do believe that this is something that needs to be fulfilled. If we don't have oversight and we don't have proper strategies around this, we see, and I think the cases of Hilco, the cases of iron, we see time after time at asphalt, you name it. So I do think that is key. And finally, I think the issue of housing. I think that we also, here at least in a ward, in a particular goal that we have, is that we need to make sure that we have stability in our neighborhoods. The issue of speculation is an issue that we cannot allow to continue. So one of my goals is to have stability in our housing, housing across the city. We need to make sure that we don't have families or seniors in the streets. It's really tragic. So I have one proposal. It's called the just cause for eviction. Right now, I think is very important. And this is not a free way. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of misinformation goes on with that. This is about making sure that we help those tenants who are paying rent but doing everything right, that they're not doing anything wrong, and unfortunately being evicted for no reason. So I do think that this is important for us to put forward like common sense legislation. Those are some of the 3 priorities, that help us have like 20,000 evictions being filed already. I'm really concerned about what's happening, especially in the pandemic. It is a matter of public health, right? That we have to have housing for families or children or seniors and people with disabilities, really vulnerable residents that are really right now in need of solutions. So those are the 3, and of course the creation of more affordable housing, but that's a citywide thing. So those are some of the 3 priorities that I do think are important.
Oh, they're all very important, and a lot to be done there. So you're going to have a busy remaining time of your term, and for sure. I want to thank you again, Alderman, for taking the time to be with us today. It gives us an opportunity to learn, not only get to know you a little bit, but also your ward, which is amazingly diverse. So I want to thank all of you out who are watching this interview, to thank you for joining us as well. And just a reminder that there will be a link to this video that will be found on the Chicago League's website. And everyone who registered for today's program who is not a league member, will be sending you an email with the link, so you don't even have to hunt for it on our website. And also, of course, we invite everyone watching, if you're not already a member, to join the League of Women Voters. We're nonpartisan, male and female can join. We welcome everyone. And you also have the opportunity to sign up for notices of future programs. And speaking of that, our next interview is scheduled to be with Alderman Howard Brookings Jr. of the 21st Ward, and that will be premiered 2 weeks from tonight on Thursday, October 7 at 6 p.m. again. And again, thank you all for Zooming with the Alderman, and in this case, Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez. Thank you again, Alderman.
Thank you so much.